Welcome to Tangential Soup, a weekly podcast discussing life in Australia, technology, food, fitness, and the like, hosted by myself, David Caddy, Melburnian, independent developer and tea enthusiast, as well as my good childhood friend, Alexander Carr, Sydney-sider, karate practitioner, and lover of adventure. So this is going to be a pretty tech-focused week, I think, Alex.
Yes.
There's a lot going on at the moment in, I think it's Berlin, Mobile World Congress.
Mm-hmm.
Lots of manufacturers showing off their new devices in the mobile space. Lots of new handsets. And also, of course, I know it was probably a few days ago, a week ago, that Samsung had their Unpacked event, unveiling their new lineup of Galaxy devices for the upcoming year, including the somewhat interesting Galaxy Fold, which is probably going to be the first of the usable foldable smartphones.
Yes. Now, from what I have learned, there has been one released into the market so far,
The Royal Flex Pi.
Yes, which you're seeming to say isn't really usable. What does that mean exactly?
It's just I hadn't really even heard of this company before they released this, right? I'm not exactly sure where they've come from, but they've really rushed this to market just to be first for those people that are interested in this type of thing. Like, if it was cheaper, like, I'd almost be interested in getting one just because it's a cool gadget.
Yeah.
But as a functional smartphone, it's lacking in a lot of areas. So this is one where I can't even remember. Does it have a screen on the outside as well when it folds in?
From what I can see, no. I'm not entirely sure. It just seems like the screen works on one side, but there's still light on the other side. I don't exactly know what that means in terms of the screen, but maybe half of it just doesn't shut off.
Oh yeah, okay. So it's one screen, then it folds around. So when it's in its folded state, then half of it becomes not illuminated anymore, and then you're only using half of it. So it's one of the designs, which we'll get into later, but it's just opening and closing. Apparently, its hinge feels very cheap, I suppose. People are like, every hands-on video I've seen of it, people go, "I'm afraid I'm going to break it," kind of thing. So that's not great.
Yeah.
But then it's also quite large.
Yes.
Like, I can't remember how big it is, but it's much wider, at least, than most smartphones. Its height might be comparable, but it's a very wide phone. And then because it's folding back on itself, it's also very thick. And also because of the way it folds, it has quite a sort of wedge shape when it closes, which means it's very fat at the hinge part.
Yes.
So that, like, you wouldn't necessarily want it as your daily driver, probably. It's like, ergonomically, I think it's a bit of a disaster.
Okay.
And when the software, is not really optimized for that setup, it probably becomes a bit of a nightmare to really use as a daily driver. As a curiosity, I think it's fine, and I'm sure they'll have some success in the market just for this very early period, especially after Samsung announced the price for their one. It's probably still going to drive a few people towards this one, which is, can't remember exactly, but I think it's $500, $600, maybe $700 compared to Samsung's, which is just under $2,000,
which is quite a lot.
Really, it is
for a phone. Although one comment I heard was you're buying a phone and a tablet, so when you look at the cost of those two things, fine.
Well, you are, or if you think about it another way, it's also two phones basically, because they've got 5 cameras, and on Samsung's one, it is actually 2 displays. You've got one on the outside and then the bigger one that folds in. So that's interesting. So let's just go through the other couple of examples that we've seen so far. Xiaomi's got one which is quite interesting. It has a double fold, which again, you've got the screen and then it folds on the outside, but you've got double hinge.
Yes. Well, one thing I noticed about this though is in the demo video, and I suppose, I mean, obviously it's a demo video, so they haven't finished the product yet.
Yes, no, this hasn't been announced. That's literally the only thing they've shown of it.
When they were kind of showing the transition from the tablet mode into the kind of folded mode when you've switched it, it looks pretty kind of jumpy, and the software seems to glitch a bit when it's kind of switching. And
Yes.
I mean, that was just something I noticed. And
Yes, again, the software is going to need a lot of work, but Google is working on for the next version of Android to have more support for these types of formats. But obviously, these devices that are going to be rushed to market this year, unless they're very late in the year, are not going to be running that version of Android. So they're going to have to try to hack together something on top of the existing Android to try to make it work.
so what they're doing really is, because I mean, you've got an existing feature in Android where you can rotate the screen, right? And that presumably changes quite a few features. So they're just doing something similar to their rotating phones that they're developing.
Yeah, I suppose that's true. But if you think about a rotation versus what's happening here, is the aspect ratio is not changing, and well, I guess it kind of is. It's just, I suppose, it's a different interaction because at a hardware level, Android is looking for a device orientation change using the accelerometer. And then if you literally just sort of overrode that to this screen folding thing, there's going to be all sorts of problems with that. So they can't exactly do that.
Right.
I I wouldn't really know 100% the best strategy to do this because I've never actually taken Android and then tried to put a skin on it. Like, that's a pretty big operation. There are hobbyists and enthusiasts that would probably know more about it. But I can understand that it's not trivial because
Yeah.
from the very beginning, like even if you have apps that are using less portion of the screen, the whole operating system has, since Android's existence, has assumed that it's running full screen, right? The phone is full screen, even if an app might be partially part screen, but the operating system has full real estate.
I understand. Yeah.
And so, I mean, even if you like, they've clearly got it working on this, but like you say, the transitions and things being jumpy and that's the kind of thing that you'll get without really optimizing it.
Yeah.
So that's kind of like a first pass, proof of concept. Yes, we can make it work, but it looks awful. So they probably can do it with enough work if you build on top of it, but really these phones are going to benefit so much from when Google actually puts proper support for this at the system level.
I see.
Yeah.
And that makes sense.
Mhm.
That makes sense. I guess my question is, have Samsung just done the same thing that everyone else has done then, just they put more money into it, so theirs will look a lot smoother?
Well, yeah, so I suppose with Samsung, yeah, I think they've probably just thrown more money at it, right? Like, they have a lot of engineers working on their version of Android. Because as you may or may not be aware, their version of Android is quite heavily skinned.
I did not know, but it makes sense that it would be.
So it's very Samsung-y versus most flavors of Android, which is, maybe not a bad thing depending on if you like it. The general consensus in sort of the tech media is that it's not necessarily the nicest skin, although I do notice recently they've sort of, I can't remember what it's called, I think it's One UI. They kind of switched away from calling it, what was it, TouchWiz. They used to call it TouchWiz, and now it's One UI, and it does look a lot cleaner on the surface. So that's good. I think they're going in the right direction.
Okay.
But anyway, besides from that, I think they do have a huge amount of resource on the software side.
Well, obviously, yeah. They're a huge company.
Whereas some manufacturers will probably spend far more resources on hardware and just kind of do the bare minimum on the Android side because,
Yeah.
I mean, in some way it's a selling feature to have something that's closer to stock Android, but then, you also want to get some unique features in there. So it's a bit of a trade-off. But Samsung just have like every feature known to man.
Yes.
Like most of them are gimmicks, but they put them in there because, hey, it's a selling point.
Well, yeah, I suppose so. I remember from my Samsung that I suppose compared to my existing phones, which are admittedly a bit cheaper, it was always all right to use. But
Yeah.
I think iPhones have always been a bit nicer, haven't they?
Well, the thing with Samsung, I suppose, is in the early days of their TouchWiz, it was really trying to take Android and make it feel more like iOS, make it feel more like an iPhone.
Right. Okay.
Just so because iPhones were always the premium player, and then Samsung were trying to position themselves as the other premium player in the Android side. They were, well, in the very beginning, which they've paid heavily for now after many court battles, they basically literally ripped stuff off like pixel for pixel almost. Like how their phone app worked and looked and the icons and all sorts of things.
Yes. Yes.
Nowadays, it's much less like that. But they still, I guess, because they've evolved from that point, they have a very distinctive feel, which is separate from the actual stock Android as envisioned by Google.
Yep.
But it's not to say it's any less usable or whatever. It just has a very different feel.
Okay. Well, I suppose this is all the kind of things that you've got to consider when you go into the foldable screen market. I mean, all I thought about was the hinge. I'm like, how do they get it to bend? Which I still don't even remotely understand.
It's pretty nifty. But yes, their videos did look pretty good with the transition sort of, because their one, they have one screen on the outside and the bigger screen is on the inside. So the two halves of the big screen fold together and you've got a smaller screen on the outside, meaning in its folded state, you're using a separate screen than the unfolded state.
Yes.
Which seems to be actually different to pretty much all the other ones, to be honest. Because the Royal FlexPi is just one screen. We haven't talked about the Huawei Mate X, which actually, to my eye, looks the nicest. They haven't announced when that's coming exactly yet or how much it'll be, but I imagine it'll be later this year because it still looks pretty good. The Xiaomi prototype, which who knows when that's coming or even if it's a real product, but again, that's got the large screen, and when you fold it, it's on the outside, and then only half of it lights up that you're interacting with in its sort of phone state.
Yeah.
So Samsung have gone a different direction, and I wondered what you thought about that in terms of those two different designs.
Well, I mean, it's an interesting question, and I obviously don't really know which one is better. To me, it makes more sense to just use the one screen. I suppose one of the questions I have about it is why they've gone with a system where the screen folds as opposed to one where the screen kind of two screens are joined together, if that makes sense, or one screen kind of pulls out. I don't know if that's possible technology at this stage, but to me that makes more sense than actually folding the screen, which seems to me to be a bit more, I don't know, prone to having accidents and accidentally bending your screen the wrong way and all the kind of stuff that could possibly go wrong with that. I mean, I suppose the hinge system works in a way that you could only possibly bend your screen in one way.
Yes, well, hopefully.
Well, yes.
Samsung did make one phone, I can't remember what it was. It was one of the Notes, and you know how the Note has the little stylus?
Yes.
And you could put it in like in the reverse way and then it would get stuck. So whoever designed that did a terrible job. The next year they fixed it, but
that would be a disaster.
Yes.
To me as well, the Huawei Mate looked the best. It looked a lot cleaner, but I mean, obviously we only have demo videos of both the Samsung and the Huawei, so really it's impossible to tell how it actually functions. As well, the Samsung looked a bit thicker than the Huawei.
Yes.
Which to me seems to be a big point around a foldable phone is you don't want it to be this huge brick in your pocket, which it kind of looked like the Galaxy Fold would be, whereas it didn't look like the Huawei had made such a thick phone. One thing I understand about the Samsung, and I don't know how the Huawei compares to this, is the Samsung's it's got quite a powerful processor or quite a powerful whatever system runs the phone. Which to me would seem to be important because presumably it'll take a lot to run these phones. So if you don't have a powerful system behind it, it would presumably not run very well, even if the software was, compatible and looked nice.
That's sort of true, but not really, because really the main point of performance comes when you've got the screen in its unfolded state and then you're kind of working it like a tablet, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So it's driving more pixels at that point.
Yes. Yeah.
However, think about 10-inch Android tablets, which basically don't exist anymore, but they did like 2 years ago and worked fine, right?
Uh-huh.
Even at high resolutions. So
Yeah.
that's not really a major concern, I wouldn't have thought. The
Okay.
chips these days are really very powerful.
Okay.
And I imagine when the Huawei one ships, it'll use the highest end Snapdragon chip, which would be able to drive it just fine, I think.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's an interesting point. I mean, to me, then Hawaii looks to be better, but you never really know till you have it in your hand, do you?
Well, no. And so I agree with you. It looks better, but here I'm going to make some counter arguments for the Samsung one.
Mm-hmm.
So these screens being flexible,
Yes.
they're obviously not glass. They're a form of polymer, plastic,
Okay.
which means if you have the screen wrapping around on the outside, you now have plastic which is much higher prone to scratching on the entire outside surface of the device.
Ah. Okay.
And also, you've got the outer part of the screen always exposed where there's no frame where the spine is, right? So
Uh-huh.
you drop it, that's quite possible to be damaged. Maybe,
Yes.
maybe not. But then also the general scratch, like even when you put it down on a table, because I don't know what the heck kind of case one would have on such a device. But if you put that down, the raw screen, like unless it's like a couch or something, a fabric surface, it's
Uh-huh.
quite possible you'll have a bit of grit there. And then if you take it and you put any sort of pressure on it, you're also going to have possibly small, like it's probably going to be pretty robust still, but there will be visible scratches probably accumulating pretty fast.
Right.
Whereas
Okay.
Samsung's design, because it has the flexible one in the inside, when it's folded, it's quite protected. And that smaller external screen is almost certainly going to have, um, you know, the super tough glass, which I can't remember the name of.
Reinforced or something? No.
Gorilla Glass, that's the one.
Oh, right.
That basically every high-end smartphone across the industry uses these days,
Right. Okay.
which is actually ridiculously scratch resistant. Like it's not scratch proof, but you really got to have something going at it to
You've got
cause
to
a
put
dent.
some effort into
Yeah.
scratching Okay.
And also because it has the frame protecting it, and it seems like that external screen is on the smaller side. Actually has quite chunky bezels, which I don't love, but because of that, I'd say it's going to be much more durable than these other reverse design ones.
Well, I wouldn't want to be paying 2000 USD for a phone that would break when I dropped it for the first time. So that is actually a really good point, and not something I would have thought of at all. Um, Not that I'm going to get one, of course, but
No. Well, you probably will eventually, though, right? Like these early examples, they're flawed and they're probably not as good as they could be, and they're going to be very expensive. But give this 2, 3, 4 years, unless it's just proven that this is just not a very good design, then it'll start to catch on and it will become mainstream very quickly. What do you think is just the general concept? If you could get one of these cheap, would you be interested?
oh, of course, yeah. I mean, undoubtedly, because I assume that they would fall into a similar price bracket that we currently have our existing smartphones in. So, yes, I mean, when it came for time for a phone upgrade, I absolutely would, because, I mean, really, to me, it's just a phone, but then I have the added advantage of having a larger screen if I ever need it.
Exactly. And as the market has proven, everyone wants a bigger screen. But they've kind of got to the point now where you can't really have a bigger screen and still fit it in your pocket. So
Yes,
this is kind of the answer to that.
yes, yeah, and that makes sense. I have actually seen the because this technology isn't the bendable screen technology didn't start with phones, did it? It started with TVs or something.
Well, the actual flexible, like just demos of a screen that flexes, has probably been around for 5, if not longer than that, more years. Um, but I think maybe you're thinking of an LG TV. I actually can't remember the manufacturer, but the other day, oh well, at the start of the year, they have one that rolls up and rolls out of a little cabinet and then rolls back in again. A big flat
Yes,
screen TV,
that's the one I've seen. That's exactly the one I've seen. Yeah.
which is actually pretty awesome. Although that's just hugely expensive. I can't even remember what the price was. I don't think they even announced it. It's just that expensive. But it is nifty, and that will also come down. But these displays have been around for a long time, but it's only recently that they've been able to get them, I guess, durable enough that they can even consider putting them in a consumer product.
Right. Okay.
But just the demos have been around for a long time.
Yes, and I would absolutely get one. You're right. It's definitely a step forward and into the future, and I guess what everyone is looking for, because we still use our screens a whole lot, and you're right. We all want bigger screens, but obviously I'll need to see it come down a lot before I even look at one. But yeah, I'm certainly looking forward to that. As I'm sure you. I'm sure you'll be entering the market a lot sooner than I will.
Maybe.
What do you think your kind of entry point will be price wise?
I know, I'm pretty tempted just at the current price, but no.
Oh, really?
No. I've got too many expenses this year. But
that's true.
Had it been a couple of years ago, you never know. I might have justified it somehow.
You would have gone for a Samsung, or would you have waited for the Huawei?
Maybe, I don't know. Yeah, I probably would have waited a little bit and seen what the Huawei one looks like. By the end of the year, there'll probably be 3, 4, 5 available. Who knows at what price points there or what quality?
Yes. Well, yeah. I suppose the quality is probably the more important point in a lot of ways.
Plus, I would definitely have waited at least for the reviews to come out for the Samsung one. So the Samsung one is out in April, and I'm going to be fascinated to see all the reviews on it.
Yeah. So I suppose the kind of final talking point here is the hinge point, and how. I mean, I assume you know how exactly they get the screen to bend around that hinge point, because there's really, I mean, obviously in the Xiaomi phone, there's 2 hinge points, so there's kind of 2 bending points, but for most of the screens, they just have that one hinge point. And I suppose that's the big change, because on either side of that, the screen's not actually bending at all.
No.
Is it the same screen that's used across the whole thing, or do you have different kind of material that's used when the phone is actually bending at that point?
No, it's the same screen, like across the whole thing, same material. As far as I know, like they could be cheating it, but theoretically this is possible from the demos I've seen, so I'm assuming they're doing it this way. And then you just have the hinge, so it's collapsing on one side but maintaining the same radius on the screen side.
I see. So it's actually just kind of absorbing that. So the screen isn't stretching in any way.
No. It can't stretch. Just bend.
Right. So you could potentially roll your phone up into a ball. I mean, not these phones, obviously, because they don't have those kind of features.
Well, that was always the early demos that they had. Like Japan Display had these, like I was saying, 5 years ago or something. And they would always show it, like just literally the screen connected by a couple of cables to have it some sort of video playing on it. And they would take it and roll it up and then unroll it.
Yes.
But that's obviously, of course, without the whole other phone substructure.
Yes. Yeah, of course.
Which is where the difficulties come in.
Yes. Many of the difficulties.
But are you right, I suppose, that you could almost have something more akin to maybe that rollable TV where the screen is kind of rolled up and then you pull it out somehow. And then maybe you've got one larger chunk that contains the phony part of it. And then you have the display come out. I don't know how you do that in a sort of durable fashion, but it's probably possible. Okay.
Because, I mean, obviously with phones, the consideration is it's going to be able to fit in your pocket.
Yes.
And, like, especially with some of the current systems we have, like the larger screens were ridiculous in the sense that I can fit it in my pocket. But, I'm a guy. I've seen women who have their phone stuffed like 1/4 into their pockets, and that's as far as it fits in.
I know. Women's fashion just don't have pockets.
They don't. And I mean, it's ridiculous, but at the same time, like, it seems to me that when they're carrying their phone around like that, they haven't really thought about what they're wearing combined with their phone that they've got.
Well, fashion's not about utility.
Well, no, it's not. That's true.
Got to suffer for the art.
Well, you do. That's right. So yes, I mean it's exciting, and it's exciting to see how technology has come. For me, obviously, I mean you're obviously much more across it. You were expecting folding phones, I assume, and you knew that they were happening far in advance of them actually happening. I'd imagine.
Well, sort of. I knew it probably would be this year, but I'm surprised that Samsung especially came out and like it's going to be available April. Like that it seems pretty aggressive to me, to be honest. Like by the end of the year, I was expecting probably a few things to come online, but like, first half from a major player,
Hmm.
that is actually a bit surprising to me.
So when do you expect Apple to release theirs? Because I mean, obviously, if
Not
Samsung
not
does,
this year.
really,
Maybe 2020, probably more like yeah, probably 2021 I'd say.
okay, really, wow,
Yeah, they're usually pretty late to things because they want to. These early ones, of course, are going to have a lot of problems, like we were saying before.
yeah,
And Apple tends not to like bringing stuff that feels a bit beta-ish
okay,
to their customer base, even if it's got a cool factor. I'm sure they're playing with these things in the lab and have been for a long time, but until they're very happy with it, they're probably not going to release it. That is, unless, a few of these manufacturers bring it out and then the market speaks and says, even at $2,000, take our money, and they sell out, they sell huge numbers. Then, of course, Apple's going to be scrambling. But I'd say that's probably not going to happen because the Samsung one's probably going to be the best quality, but it's going to be super expensive. And so these things are going to be a bit of a novelty for probably at least another 18 months.
right,
And then when they're more mainstream, Apple's probably going to be another 12 months behind that. Is usually how it works out.
right, okay,
Unless it's their own invention, but these things aren't really their own invention. Like Apple doesn't make displays yet.
oh, they don't, okay,
No. So they would be buying them from Samsung or Japan Display or whoever.
okay.
Yeah.
Well, that makes a lot of sense to me. Will be exciting to see it when it comes, though.
Will be.
Yeah. Is there any new technology that you're specifically looking out for? Just while we're on the topic.
Tech's kind of become a bit of a lull, I'd say.
Really?
Like, I was always fascinated about the next new thing and slight advancement in this and that. But I feel like we've not necessarily peaked, but the advances are coming at a slightly slower pace than they were even 5 years ago.
Is this it then? Has the human race reached its pinnacle?
No, I'd say there's probably going to be another little jump, but in the last few years, like even talking about phones and tablets and laptops and consumer electronics as a whole, I feel like if you bought one, 5 years ago and you bought one today, they're definitely better today, but you could still totally use one from 5 years ago. Whereas if you go from 5 years ago to 10 years ago, my goodness, it's just, night and day.
That is actually a very good point. Yes.
Mm.
Wow.
So that's more what I'm thinking.
Okay.
But we're still waiting on quantum computing, if that ever actually happens.
Oh, right. Yes. Okay. I have heard about that.
Because that would be a game changer.
That would change the game completely, wouldn't it?
Yes, the whole qubits. It would basically make top of the end processors today look like nothing.
Yeah.
And then you could really start doing some really interesting things with big data.
Yes, that's true. That's true. Far beyond my understanding,
Mm.
but something beyond the ones and the zeros, right?
Mine too, to a certain extent, but in a typical processor, you have bits. Well, you have transistors which represent bits which are either on or off, binary 1, 0.
Yes.
In a quantum computer, you have what is called a qubit, which can not only represent a 1 or a 0, but anything in between.
Anything in between.
Meaning you can store vast amounts of information in one bit. Or, I don't know if that's true. I'm kind of talking out of my league a little bit. I did sort of understand it, but that is kind of true. You can store between 1 and 0 anywhere in between.
Yes.
Which somehow opens up a huge amount of possibilities, meaning that your compute time for things just comes way down.
Yes.
I forget exactly how it works. But on the theoretical level, it sounds very good, but they haven't really been able to make it work in the real world. They've got very niche applications. There's a lot of supercomputers out there that are quote unquote quantum computers, but they're not general purpose quantum computers, which
Right, I
is
see.
what we're after.
Yes.
That and more sophisticated AI, but we'll get there eventually. That's just a matter of time.
Is it a matter of time, is it? Okay. Because I thought that, I mean, my understanding of AI is obviously, again, very rudimentary, but I thought that while we have AI, very advanced AI is still a very long time away.
Probably, but these things always happen a bit quicker than one thinks.
Yeah.
Like in 10 years, it'll be pretty good for like more niche applications, but I would say maybe like diagnosis, medical things and that, it's probably going to do quite well at. And I know, did you see the other day, DeepMind released a AI for StarCraft 2 that played as the race Protoss,
Hmm.
and then they pitted it against all these top tier players. It smashed them.
Yes. Really?
Yeah.
No, I've got to watch this.
Yeah, it's good.
Wow.
And like they've been working on it for months, but they've taken existing work and built on it for months. But it's not like they've been working on it for years and tweaked it super well. This was sort of like I think the second main test. They did one a month or two ago, and it did okay, but it lost most of the games.
Hmm.
But then they've just come on leaps and bounds since then.
Right.
And even though they've only got it trained for one race, and I think maybe on only one map or a few maps, but on that, they're now consistently beating the best players in the world.
Wow.
And it is operating like a human would. It has, I guess, the advantage that it can put in commands basically as fast as it wants to. It's not
Hmm.
limited by our, we have mechanical fingers that have to operate buttons and switches. But theoretically, we could do it as fast as the machine, which we probably can't do. So it's like micro is probably a bit advanced.
Yeah.
But if you take that out of it and just sort of the micro battles, its overall strategy and its macro and its understanding of what's going to be good in a certain situation is very human-like
Right. Okay.
already. And again, that's a very niche application, and it's going to probably stay niche for a long time. And you're talking about very general purpose AI. Um,
Well, yeah. I mean, yes. I mean, obviously that's the goal, right? You have
that is
AI
the
that
goal.
can,
That's the singularity. The
yeah,
And that
the
is
AI
probably a
that
long
can do
time
it
away,
all.
right? But these domains that it's going to be very good at are going to expand and expand rapidly. It's
Yes.
going to put a lot of people out of jobs. It already is. Like even programmers, my line of work, I think is going to be eaten up by a lot of AI stuff.
Oh, okay.
You're going to see the need for low level, or low level is the wrong term because we use that for other things. But say like your web programmers and probably even app programmers, you're going to see the need for them go way down as AI can start building these things. And then you're going to see a smaller amount needed of programmers that have the very advanced techniques for like maintaining these AIs and things.
Right. I see. I see. So is it time for you to start looking at looking at AI?
Yes. Well, I mean, I always have been, but being an independent developer, it's very hard to think of a problem that artificial intelligence will help me achieve a better result in less time. Because most of my projects have a relatively limited scope because I'm only one person. I only have so much time.
Yes.
Um, but piggybacking off the work that people are doing, maybe that will change in a few years where you can do quite advanced stuff in not too much time. Already now, like Google I think is one of the main players in this. They've got a whole open source library. Well, I'm not sure if it's open source. I think it is though. Of machine learning stuff that's called TensorFlow, and you can quite easily set it up to start running on things. If you've got some data to train it on and you know what you want to train it on, it's actually not that hard to get up and running. So that sort of stuff is going to continue to advance, and so is our computing power. And yeah, it's only a matter of time, and not a very long amount of time, I don't think.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
I suppose on the subject of AI and its impact in our lives, have you seen the social security system that's been released in China?
Oh yes, it's sort of similar to that episode of Black Mirror, right? Nosedive.
It is very similar to that episode of Black Mirror. Yes, I didn't even know that they were working on a social security system. I mean, not that I would really. I don't follow these things, but it's just kind of been released, and it's where you can kind of identify someone by their or someone can be kind of researched or valued by their
It identifies them and then it gives them sort of like a rank or something, kind of, right? Or
yeah.
a certain amount of points or prestige or access to things, right?
But I mean, the sad thing about that is a lot of it relies on credit rating, which is
Okay, yeah.
not a reliable indication of a person.
No.
Um,
I assume they're going to incorporate more and more stuff, but I guess to get it online, they just did the easiest thing.
they did, yes,
Mm.
yeah, and I think it also links to WeChat, so you can see people around you who have a bad credit rating, and it also kind of grades a neighborhood based on the amount of people who are there who have a bad credit rating, and or just who have a bad rank in this system. It's pretty scary stuff actually.
That's terrifying.
Just to kind of have something have that level of control over your life, and people now are unable to actually leave China if they have a bad score on this system, so they're just stuck there.
It's kind of unimaginable to us, sort of in the Western world. Do you think we'll ever be forced to contend with such systems, or you think there'll be too much pushback? I'm hoping there'll be too much pushback.
Well, I mean, it's funny because what our parents kind of fought for, kind of around freedoms and the rights of individual people. I think a lot of those things have come to bear, but then we have through those things kind of walked into different traps. And I think one of those big traps is AI and the fact that we have basically surrendered ourselves to large corporations, and those corporations now have more information on us than I guess anyone has ever had in the past. And I think that you'd probably find that if the Western world were to run one of these systems, they'd probably have more of our information than the Chinese systems would, if they were to have access to the information that Google and Facebook and everything have.
Yes, that's true.
So will we have to contend with it? I don't know. I mean, I don't think in our lifetimes we would, but I think it would only take one major event for the thinking of the whole world to change. And it might be a nuclear event, it might be a climate change event, it might be something else. But, for that necessity to come in for the human race to be controlled, to stop it destroying itself, really, if you think about it, it wouldn't take that much, would it?
No, probably not.
So would we have to contend with it? Hopefully not, but maybe.
Hopefully not.
Yes.
And on that somber note, I think we should wrap up. Yeah.
Yes, that's a good idea. Give our listeners something to think about.
Let's go listen to something a bit more cheery now.
Yes.
Thanks again for joining me, Alex.
Not a problem, David. Pleasure as always.
You can follow and get in touch with us on Twitter at Tangential Soup, and you can find this week's show notes for more information about today's topics at tsp.fm/203. If you enjoyed today's episode, please consider sharing it with anyone you think might also, and we'll talk to you again next week. Bye.
Ciao.
Have you stopped your recording? Just by the by.
No. Oh no. Oh no. Oh no. Oh no. Did I just close that without saving it?
It probably automatically saves. Probably.
Recent files. Oh my god. Oh my god. I may have screwed this up majorly, David. I don't think I recorded that. Or I don't think I saved it.
Don't panic. Panic is the worst thing you can do.
So I'm going to recent files and there are no recent files.
Oh boy.
Yeah, no, I did not save that.
Wouldn't it have prompted you for a dialogue or something there? Like, are you sure you want to quit?
I did get that, and I said I do not want to save it.
Oh, okay. Then you probably did delete it.
Whew, that's bad news. Wait, maybe I can retrieve it somehow. Let me look it up. Oh dear.